hide ZR, and let's break down animation. So let's start with this one. So this is pretty cool. There are a couple scenes we can push here. There is tempo. So right now it's a bit even in spacing. So we start and we go fast all the way, the entire time. So 1, 2, 3, and then we have this frame, which also has a big change. Then we go this, have a bit of a slowdown. I think we can push the spacing, make it less even, maybe give it a little bit of anticipation, so slower start, get in some mass, then keep the form bigger so we can erase stuff, because these elements here are still fairly similar to the elements there, and they move a lot in space, and because of that we won't notice a big difference. Since they move so much, the more the particles and the shapes move in space, the more we have to exaggerate the difference for the animation to still be readable. So, thinking about that, first, let's add one more frame here. So we had this shape, let's add an equivalent of squash. So accumulating volume, creating more fire. So kind of a squash. And then let's do a stretch here. And let's keep the form more whole, bigger, so that we can erase it more later. Let's not push it as far, or let's push this far further so we can create a slowdown later. So we have more difference in terms of the spacing. So let's do a slowdown here. We don't have many frames, so the top gets erased a lot. Let's keep that idea. And this kind of goes and catches up so that we have a composition change. So we don't keep the same placement of the masses. We don't want to keep the same intervals between them. Otherwise, again, since they're moving a lot, we won't be able to read the design change if it is too small. But if the design change is significant, we will notice it. Maybe a bit more mass so we can read the change and add even more change on the next frame. And let's not break everything up. Since it's fire, it will break up into particles, including from the source, near the source. And now let's erase the remaining parts. So the slowdown here, dun, dun. Let's keep an interesting, cool, pretty silhouette. And let's look what we got now. will have more power, it will have more energy, and it will be more readable. So again, having these big compositional changes. So from thin, small to thick, small, then to thin, long, and then erasing fast, but leaving some masses to be erased later, so not everything is erased on one single frame. And then creating some deceleration, more deceleration here, less deceleration on this one, so that we have variation of speed, not breaking off everything in one mass. If we break up into particles, we want to break up near the source as well. And then creating a cool, interesting composition with the particles that we have. Would be even better if we have a bit more variation in the path of the particles. So they're not just going all straight, but maybe they have some variation in their directions. So maybe they become more unstable, more wavy. So I'm creating a silhouette and some variations of the direction. And then having more frames, more slowdown for the particles, lets us create more contrast, fast and slow. So with a fast start and the slow end. And we can experiment a lot with that, varying the particles, their direction, how much mass do we have, does it stay in like one bigger block, smaller one. Here, lots of cool fire animations. Here we can mostly track the passes better and not raise them too early. So fire is more stable at the core, meaning that usually we don't cut it too heavily at the bottom. And that allows us to keep more mass as to also keep the consistency of the motion. The second thing is we need to track the direction of the cuts and masses very carefully, because that's usually the reason why animation that is otherwise good will not work well. So here we go, 1, 2, we cut too early, so we don't have the mass to cut later. And then this curve is good. And this curve is pretty good. But then we do the cut, but then so direction change, 1, 2, instantly back. So this is a part that doesn't work. We need to build up the mass from the bottom rather than kind of doing that and immediately going back. Because otherwise we are pushing the mass out and we are immediately cutting it in. So we kind of do whoop, to kind of like a squishing ball rather than the fire. So it's mostly transitions and this kind of cuts. So here the mass goes down, this part, and then immediately goes up again. So again, we need to build the mass from the bottom rather than going up and down. Here is just the direction. So we go up, we go to the left, back here. And here it's also the direction. So we go to the left, immediately back to the right. So again, we need to build the mass from the bottom and you'll be fine. So this mass is probably supposed to be rising too. Let's do this, cut less here, so we can more gradually build up the volume. Want to keep the motion because we are not in deceleration in terms of the spacing. So probably want to keep the general spacing going. carefully tracking these edges. So we still move the particles up so they don't get stuck in one spot and then jump. I'm gonna try to avoid that. So this goes on the curve. And this expands. And that's how we get the next frame. Okay, it needs to be faster. So it's going here now. So we can't really go in the opposite direction. So if we wanted to move to the left, we want to start moving it more to the left earlier. Something like that. And then we'll get a transition. Same with the other fires. So we want the particles to be going. We don't want to interrupt them and slow them down in the middle here. We don't want to make the center sing and then expand it again. We want the mass to move naturally from the bottom to the top, from the sides to the center, and so on. And usually we want to avoid suddenly interrupting the motion in the middle of the fire too. So 1, 2, stop. 2, 3, stop. 4, sudden acceleration. So we don't want to have that. We want to have a clear curve and to have gradual decelerations. Usually they will be at the start or at the end. So slower here. Sometimes we get some less noticeable slowdowns in the middle, although it's a bit more rare. And in terms of particles, we want to vary their sizes usually. so that the particles are not too similar in shape and size. Things like that. Same with the negative spaces on the fires. So I would suggest trying singular fires as well, so we can focus more on the motion and the design without being too overwhelmed and distracted by complexity of trying to tackle multiple elements at once. And I think you're going well. You just need to polish scenes, clearly track all the elements, and push the design even further to push the differences between the masses. So right now, for example, these cats are similar and the masses are similar in sizes. So we can push this type of variation in the design. That's it. Wish you good luck with the animations and see you later.